Hey guys, it's Scott from Boy, continuing our Off-Road 101 series. Today our topic is going to be suspension systems. One of the first things we like to look at when we get our truck or our Jeep or our off-road rig is how are we going to get more ground clearance? How are we going to be able to get through those tougher trails and back deeper into the woods? One of the ways we're going to do that is to look at our suspension system. We're going to need a little more lift. We're going to need to be able to get a little more clearance. We're going to need to be able to get a little bigger tire on there in order to get deeper back into the woods. Now, quite often we think we just need to get the biggest lift out there so we can get back there. And that's really just not the case. What I want you guys to take into consideration is this. How are you going to use your rig? Is this a daily driver? Is it a dual purpose? Are you going to daily drive it and then you're going to go out and you're going to go camping in the most remote, dispersed camping campgrounds? Are you going to take it out and go hunting? Do you have a farm with some property and go out through the woods? Are you going to do organized off-roading? Are you going to go to Jeep Jamborees and Toyota and truck events that are off-road, that you're doing trails for the point of doing trails? Plan on visiting ghost towns in Colorado. These are all different things that we might do with our rig, and we need to think about what suspension system is going to suit it better. It's easy to get caught up in hype. It's easy to get caught up in brand names. We see these brand names hammered in our face on all of our favorite TV shows and magazines, and maybe they're right for you. Maybe they are, but maybe they're not. More lift is not necessarily better. A couple things are going to happen. One, our center of gravity is going to change. That's simple. We know that. We raise the vehicle, it's going to be a little more tippy. But what else are we going to do? Most modern vehicles are going to use a control arm style suspension. What's going to happen? This is connected to our axle. If we raise it, it goes down. When it goes down, the wheel comes back. We change the wheelbase of the vehicle just by lifting it 3 or 4 inches. When does that become a problem? When does this geometry start to cause issues? And I can tell you it's pretty quick. Once you get over 2 or 3 inches, a lot of stuff starts to change. Drive shaft angles, castor angle in your alignment, wheelbase changes. Not to mention, when we're dealing with extra short control arms, when they roll down like this, all of a sudden, the geometry of it changes a lot when you get down in this type of an arc. And so the wheels will actually move forward and backward while you're driving. This can become an issue. How do we get those put back where they're supposed to be? How do we change those angles? One of the first things we need to think about is adjustability. So when working with any modified suspension system, I like to have as much adjustable components as I can. With the adjustability, we have the capability of changing the length as needed by rotating out the ends, by using a locking mechanism to keep everything tight. And in extreme situations, to combat some of that, we may need to go to something like a long arm suspension, or we may need to go to a control arm drop bracket, different things like that. On most of your linked vehicles, you can do what's commonly known as a long arm. This is a long arm example of this. They both do the same purpose on the same vehicle. On the long arm, you cut the brackets off and you weld on a new set of brackets further back. And what happens is we can keep these more parallel, and as they go through the range of motion, the wheelbase change just isn't anywhere near the same. We get a lot more stability. Obviously, like everything, the more components, the more complicated they get, the more expensive they get. So when we start looking into things like 6-inch lifts, 8-inch lifts, or something like that, we're going to spend a lot of money just to get this thing up in the air. We're going to spend even more to make it to where we can actually drive it and enjoy it. This is not an area that we want to pick the cheapest components on the market. One thing that we recommend, and this is really important, I want anyone who's thinking about buying an off-road vehicle new or used from a dealer to think about. When the dealership is selling a modified vehicle, what are they selling you? You might think that this one's all set up to go off-road, but the reality of it is that 99% of the dealers are selling you something that they built for pure street appeal, meaning The people driving by in front of the dealership see it, get excited, run in, and impulse buy it. Are you getting a suspension system that's designed for the way you're going to use your vehicle? Is it, I mean, honestly, what we have seen is that dealerships tend to be price conscious and street appeal. They want the best look, the most exciting look for the cheapest price. And what do we get with that? We get vehicles that don't drive that well. It's not too often that you get excited about buying a vehicle, sit in the driver's seat and drive it and hate it the first time you drive it. That doesn't really show up until the excitement wears off. 6 months down the road, you can't keep it on the lane and you're exhausted and you're probably still making payments on a $50,000 vehicle that you can't stand to drive. We don't want the dealership to be in charge of picking out the correct suspension system and the correct setup for our vehicles. They may know more about the vehicle as a whole because they built it, but they don't know more about the modified vehicle as a whole, and that's really important. What they do know about is how to sell vehicles, and they're really good at that. As vehicle sales have slowed down, and as the market has become increasingly more competitive, another piece that we found is dealerships are trying to use the fear of voiding your warranty with modifications, and it's really just not the case. Now look, if you do a crazy build and put a V8 in it and you stretch it and you put all new suspension components and just rip everything out of it, yeah, you're probably going to void the warranty. But if you're looking at something that's reasonable, a 2 to a 3-inch lift kit, 35-inch tires, that kind of thing, no, you're not going to avoid the warranty. And as a matter of fact, the Magnuson-Moss Act protects us from this type of thing. The Magnuson-Moss Act says that the dealership cannot force us to buy replacement or repair parts for the vehicle from them to maintain the warranty as a whole. Now, sure, if you put on this TerraFlex control arm on a brand new Jeep or something like that, if you put this on, this component isn't going to be under warranty from your dealership. But for them to come through and say the headlight is no longer under warranty, that's what we're talking about here. Now, all of our aftermarket companies, they bring their own warranties and their own protection out there, so you don't have to worry about that. But the dealership really cannot just blanket void your warranty. They try to scare you into buying their product. It's just not the case. The government and the law protects us from that. So the different reasons that we would lift our vehicle is as it gets higher off the ground, we're going to get a better approach angle. Now, approach angle is going to be kind of a line, an imaginary line that we might draw between the bumper to the contact point of the tire. As we lift the vehicle, our approach angle gets better, as we can see in the diagram. The breakover angle is going to be the distance between the tires, contact point of the inner edge of the tire to the center of the vehicle at its lowest point, and then back down to the back tire. That's going to be our breakover point. And then our departure angle is going to be the same as as the front. It's going to be from the contact point of the tire to the bumper. The more distance, the longer we get that, the more capability we have to get over straight static objects. And these are the different reasons why we might choose different heights, larger tires, etc. On a control arm type vehicle, when we lift it, one of the phenomenons that happen is we take out castor. Castor is a very important alignment angle. And castor can be simply thought about shopping carts and bicycles. On our shopping cart, what do we call the wheels? We call them castors because they have negative castor. They just flop all over the place and they'll go wherever you direct them. Versus a bicycle, we can get up to going a little bit of speed, take our hands off the handlebars, keep going straight forward. The difference between these two is that the bicycle projects weight in front of the tire assembly. Then the tire wants to follow. So that gives us a sense of direction. That gives us, it kind of forces that tire to try to follow the projection of the weight. Now when you're on the highway, think about that real quick. That's really nice. You can kind of have more sense of direction. You're not wandering all over the road. Versus a vehicle with low or negative castor, think about our shopping cart. What happens? It'll go any direction that it gets any input from whatsoever, if not just break into a violent flop back and forth. Sounds even worse. The only way we can correct these type of things is by having that adjustable suspension. We can control that. Another very important part of our lift kit and our suspension system is going to be the shock absorbers or the strut assemblies. Now this is one of the areas that's going to affect our ride quality the most, assuming that we have the appropriate control arm angles and the appropriate alignment angles. If we have all of that in the right place, the next thing that's going to make the biggest difference is going to be our shock absorber. Now, there's a lot of different styles. Twin tube is the first one we'll talk about, and this is what most of our vehicles come with. This is from our friends at TerraFlex. This is their vehicle specific 9550 shock. This is the basic shock. What we have is we have a piston in the middle, about half the size of the body of the shock. And in that piston, we have hydraulic fluid and we have a nitrogen charge. And the valving is down towards the bottom, so as that piston goes down, it resists fast movement. It's a nice, static, comfortable ride that's easily controlled. I say static because no matter how you drive, this shock is always going to behave with the exact same amount of force. The only thing that can happen to this is what's called shock fade, and it can happen from aerating the fluid because our nitrogen charge and our hydraulic oil are in the exact same cylinder. So the faster we move it, the more we pump it, the more we mix nitrogen and oil together. Nitrogen is compressible. All of a sudden we start to lose shock action and dampening action, and the harder we drive it, the less shock action we get. If you want the smoothest ride possible in a static cruising down the highway example, this might be a shock for you, or if you're on a budget, this might be a shock for you. If you're looking for something where you can feel the road more, have a little better handling, some cornering resistance, and not experience that, then you might want to move up to a monotube shock. This is an adjustable monotube shock with a piggyback reservoir. Now the difference between this shock and that shock, the entire body is the cylinder. We have a much larger piston. And inside there, we have an internal floating piston as well. Typically we find those up in the reservoir on this style shock, but the gas charge and the hydraulic oil are not mixed together. So we get a couple of things. We can move this shock a lot, and it's not ever going to mix the nitrogen and oil, so we're not going to experience that shock fade. The reservoir gives us much more capacity to hold more hydraulic fluid to keep it cooled down. We're also going to be able to use almost the entire length of the shock for travel versus having to try to mix up all the valving in the travel, so we can get a lot more shock out of a smaller package. And this one happens to be adjustable. This is a tow haul or a sport mode and a tow mode shock. So depending on how we're using the vehicle, we can flip this lever and we can choose which ride we want. If you're going to go and haul some things, you're going camping, you're going to go out, load up with camping gear, turn it up on firm. If you're going to go do some sport driving, and you're going to go through some gravel roads pretty quick, or you're in a hurry, you can turn it down a little bit softer. So it can be custom set up for your driving style for the moment. What we also get with this is we get more of a dynamic dampening feature, because as we increase and we heat that shock up, the nitrogen charge pressure increases. Nitrogen's pressure is temperature, is influenced by temperature. So the faster and the more harder we use this shock, the warmer the nitrogen charge gets, the higher the pressure gets, the more dampening we get. So we have a shock that can adapt a little more to how we're using it at the moment. This will have a little more firm ride. It also will give you some resistance in turning. You'll find that the vehicle and the body sway is going to be a lot less, where the twin tube doesn't have the capability of doing that. I wouldn't say it's a harsh ride, but it's going to be a little firmer ride. We've got much higher pressures in this. But it's not firm in the terms of like chipping your teeth on a log wagon. On our straight axle vehicles, another piece that we need to think about is the sway bar. The anti-sway bar that comes equipped on our vehicle helps us handle better when we're on the road and we're on faster turns. It helps transfer power from one side to the other. We're really going to need that on our daily driving. We're really going to need that when we're loaded up with camping gear or we're traveling across great distances. When we're back on a tougher trail, we're really that anti-sway bar could hamper our capability. What we're going to find is it will try to transfer the weight to the other side, and you'll end up picking a tire really high up in the air. So when we're on really flexy terrain, we might want to consider disconnecting the sway bar. Now this can be done with hand tools. You can unbolt your sway bar link and you can tie it up out of the way, and that is one way to do it, although it's pretty cumbersome and nobody likes rolling around in the mud. Another way to do that is with a quick disconnect. Now this is a JKS sway bar disconnect. And basically what we do is, instead of having bolts, we have these really nice machined pins that we put into place. We've got a clip, and what we do is we undo that clip, all right, and then we just slide our sway bar link off, tie it up out of the way, completely remove it, whatever's appropriate for your vehicle, and then you have full motion. Now it's really important, reconnect these when you're done, because if you have to make an evasive maneuver, you're going to want that stability. When you're off-road, you're going to want the most travel you can get. Now this is going to help you keep all your tires on the ground so you have the most traction and you can get through the tougher obstacles. There are other ways to do this. Some of the Jeep market has come out with the Jeep Rubicon, from the factory, has an electronic disconnect. You can push a button when you're in 4-low. It'll disconnect it electronically for you. We also have some aftermarket sway bars that are designed for off-road use, or some that are designed for dual-purpose use. The first one we'll talk about is the off-road sway bar. We have some companies. Curry is one of them, a Rock Jock, same company, different branding. The Rock Jock sway bar is an off-road sway bar. It's a torsional style. It has different adjustable arms. Now what this gives us is anti-sway resistance without losing the travel. It is not a direct replacement for the factory sway bar. You will find that your handling is reduced. Off-road, you will find that you actually transfer the weight better and you actually get more traction. There's also some dual-purpose off-road sway bars that have a lever and 2 torsion rods. And what we have with this is we have a street mode, and then we have a trail mode, and then possibly even a full disconnect mode. And this gives you the best of all the worlds, where you have great stability when you're driving down the road, good flexibility and travel when you're doing most of your trails, or even complete disconnect when you really want the most suspension travel out there. So those are the most common questions that we get about suspension systems. As normal, look us up on the internet, axleboy.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram. Give us a call, send us an email. We'll be happy to walk you through what you need for your vehicle and your style driving. And hopefully we'll see you guys out on the trail. Thanks for watching.